Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? You're my rock. The bride and groom danced their first dance together. The room dark, the spotlight on them. Imogen Carlson tried and failed to grit her teeth. God, nothing was simple these days. Not even the simple acts of jealousy and resentment. How cruel this dance was to parade their beautiful normalcy for everyone to see. She glared. Her mother leaned over, but not too close, gosh no, and whispered into her ear, "Do try to smile, dear. You're positively green with envy. It is your cousin's wedding, after all. Couldn't you try to look happy for her? And do something about those straps, will you, dear? They're, slipping." She winced. Pun intended? But Imogen did as her mother requested. She was already on the fringes of society since her accident. She ought not to exacerbate things. Imogen sat upright straighter and forced a smile onto the thing the mirror insisted was her face. She then dug out the dress straps, which had started to dig into both shoulders. The married couple, hands clasped, faces inches apart, spun across the floor in sync. Now and then, they snuck a kiss, much to the delight of the onlookers, who cheered and whistled. The muscles beneath Imogen's eyes twitched. All she wanted was to stay at home and hide away in her room, behind the safety of closed curtains. Yes, lock herself away and await any news from the doctors and scientists. Of course, there was the possibility that they might never understand her issue or find a cure. Mum and Dad had said she couldn't isolate herself like a leper if that were the case. When she retorted that she was a leper, they'd only looked at her with wounded puppy dog eyes. And here they were, watching a couple do everyday things, like touching and kissing. She'd never experience these things again, unless she were okay with screams in response. The song wound to an end, and the crowd roared and applauded. The couple opened up the dance floor to friends and family, waving them over. The music changed from elegant to upbeat. Imogen's parents got up, hand in hand. Her father reached out for her, then stopped before he could hurt himself. "Would you like to?" he said, nodding towards the dancing mob. When he saw the slight shake of his wife's head. He answered himself. No, I suppose you better not. Acidic bile stung the back of her throat. God, she wanted some cake. But she was afraid that people would watch her as she ate, horrified, but unable to look away. Kill me now, she muttered under her breath. Oh, if I did that, I wouldn't get to introduce you to Alan. Imogen jumped and yelped. It was Martin, the groom. He wore a tux and held a glass of white wine by the stem. He was smiling at her, a mischievous twinkle in his eyes, heart squelching in her chest. Imogen frowned. What was he here to do? Make fun of her? Pull a prank on her? She'd had enough of that from the local kids, who posted jelly packets through their letterbox. She supposed Mum had told her sister, who told her daughter and her groom-to-be. Not that they wouldn't have been able to see that something was wrong with her as soon as she showed up. During their first dance, the only light sources were the DJ's spotlight and Imogen's skin. Who's Alan? Martin's smile widened. He was tipsy. An old school chum of mine. I thought you two would hit it off. Imogen's furrowed brow deepened. Martin had to be joking. And why on earth would anybody hit it off with someone like me? You can see me, right? Because you're looking positively radiant tonight, said Martin with a wink. Imogen stared at him. He faltered. Sorry, not funny. The corners of her lips twitched. She could see why her cousin liked this man. He was kind and genuine. It was a little funny, she conceded. He relaxed. Alan's a great guy, and he just arrived. He couldn't make it to the ceremony, otherwise you'd have definitely noticed him. There had to be a catch. Okay, well, what's wrong with him then? Martin nodded, as though he'd expected this. Alan had a little accident a few months back. He's been struggling with it. I thought the two of you might have a lot to talk about. Imogen winced. Man, she had a tongue of acid sometimes, like the rest of her. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean... She shook her head. Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's meet the guy. Martin downed the last of his wine, set it on the table, and took a fresh glass from a passing waiter's tray. Great. Come, I'll introduce you to him. He's right over there. Now listen, he's a little sensitive about his looks, but... Martin stopped and looked at her, swaying. I don't think you'll judge him too harshly on that account. Imogen gasped when she saw him. Alan was sat alone in the far corner of the room, where the shadows swam, nursing a drink. He appeared to be a stone golem. Imogen, slurred Martin, gesturing back and forth. This is Alan I was telling you about. Alan, this is... Imogen stepped forward with a genuine smile for the first time in months. She cut Martin off. Imogen, she said. It's a pleasure to meet you, Alan. Alan groaned, eyes fixated on his drink, which the servers had served him in a metal beer stein. Yeah, sure it is. You've had your look at me now. I haven't finished having my look at you, Alan. Alan flinched, looked up, then gasped. Oh, he said. Oh, she answered. Martin laughed, his glass of wine half empty. All right, I'll pat myself on the back and leave you two to get to know each other. Have fun. She sat beside Alan, who could not take his eyes off her. She removed her polyester gloves to reveal her transparent, gooey green skin. Car crash, 2 lorries, each carrying mutagenic agents, collided. Nobody was hurt, except for a certain Imogen Carlson. She was trapped in her Pinto when the chemicals combined to make something new. Now I can't touch organic materials without absorbing and dissolving them. Alan nodded. He'd ripped his suit where he'd tried to pull it on over his gravel surface. I was backpacking alone when I got the phone call that my mum had fallen down the stairs. I rushed home, taking a shortcut through the haunted mountains. I ignored all the warning signs telling you not to. I guess the mountains took it as an insult and cursed me to a life of cold stoniness. Mum's fine, by the way. Her heart ached for him. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Must suck not being able to touch anyone. Doctors much help? She shook her head. Nope. They've no idea. Mine neither. They said they've never seen any rock like it, that it doesn't seem to be organic. She gaped at him. She looked from her green, gloopy hand to his rocky one. She looked at him, a question in her eyes. Alan took a minute to register the importance of what he'd said, eyes widening. And then he smiled and answered the question by taking her hand with his. He did not scream. There was no bubbling or sizzling. Imogen did not feel the strange sensation of eating via something other than her mouth. She'd experienced it before, and it wasn't pleasant. Wow, she said, unable to say more. Alan leaned closer. Would you like to dance, Imogen? She thought about it, then threw her anxieties to the wind. Yeah, yes, I would, Alan. On their way to the dance floor, Alan stepped on a man's foot, breaking it. Alan didn't notice the screams for an ambulance. She had his complete attention. On their way to the dance floor, Imogen brushed a woman's hair with her ungloved arm, eating the strands. She didn't notice the little shriek or the woman's death glare. He had her complete attention. Doctors have called it thingification, after the thing from Fantastic Four. My guys are calling mine blebitis, like in The Blob. I see you've also spent a lot of time hiding away indoors, glued to the screen. I have too. Guess we're not so alone now, huh? She nodded. Question. The Blob. Original from 1958 or the 1988 remake? Alan pondered as they started to dance, a wide circle of empty dance floor opening up around them. The original's got its charms, but for me, the remake takes the cake. Blasphemy. I know. Imogen couldn't help but smile. Those were her thoughts exactly. She leaned forward and kissed him on his stony lips. When I first saw you, my legs turned to jelly. Alan, grinning after the initial shock of the kiss, pulled her close so they were dancing skin to skin. And when I saw you, it warmed my cold stone heart. Imogen sighed and rested her head against his chest. What a wonderful wedding. Way, terminal. Dread, 1. The announcement. The loudspeakers crackled to life, sending a sharp hiss of static through the cavernous, dimly lit terminal. The noise was jarring, a sudden intrusion in the uneasy silence that had settled over the travelers, who were slumped in their seats, fatigue etched deeply into their faces. The endless delays had worn them down, and now they were too exhausted to glance up. The air was thick with the stale scent of burnt coffee and damp, worn-out carpets. A suffocating blend that only added to the growing sense of unease. Then, the announcement came, each word clear, yet eerily mechanical, carrying a disquieting undertone. Attention, all passengers. Due to some unforeseen circumstances, all flights are cancelled indefinitely. Please remain in the terminal. Do not leave the airport. We apologize for the inconvenience. The voice was devoid of emotion, a cold, detached command that sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Murmurs of frustration, tinged with fear, spread among the passengers, their voices rising and falling like the tide. Overhead, the departure boards flickered, the once orderly rows of destinations and times now spiraling into chaos as every flight switched from delayed to canceled. The fluorescent lights above seemed to dim in unison, their sporadic flickering casting long, jittery shadows across the floor. The terminal, once bustling with the energy of travel, now felt vast, cold, and hollow. A tomb of missed connections and lost hope. To the unseen, hours dragged on, though no one could tell whether it was hours or mere minutes. Time had lost its grip, slipping through the cracks like the insidious cold that seeped into the bones of those huddled in the terminal. People tried to make themselves comfortable, reclining awkwardly on the hard, unyielding plastic chairs, some curling up on the cold, unforgiving floor. Others wandered aimlessly, their eyes hollow, faces pale under the flickering lights. The airport staff, usually a constant presence, had vanished without a trace. The food courts stood empty, their colorful signs now dark, and the enticing smells of food had long faded. Even the ever-vigilant security personnel were nowhere to be found. The only sound was the low, relentless hum of the air conditioning. This dull drone draped the terminal in a blanket of oppressive silence. Occasionally, the rustle of a traveler shifting uncomfortably, or the faint tap of rain against the massive windows broke the quiet. Still, these sounds only served to amplify the growing sense of isolation. The terminal's once familiar noises had transformed into something alien and unsettling. A young woman, clutching a frayed boarding pass like a lifeline, approached the information desk, her footsteps echoing eerily in the empty space. "Excuse me?" she called out, her voice trembling as it reverberated off the walls, swallowed by the emptiness surrounding her. "Is anyone here? What's going on?" Her voice lingered in the air, unanswered, before fading into the void. She turned back towards the scattered passengers, her heart pounding. Then, something caught her eye, a fleeting movement in the glass's reflection, a quick and fluid shadow slipping away into the dim corridors leading to the gates. She spun around, eyes wide, but saw nothing. The same lifeless scene. Yet something had changed. The air felt thicker, heavier, charged with an unseen menace. It was as if the terminal itself was watching, waiting. Others began to sense it too. Paranoia spread like a contagion, infecting one passenger after another. Whispers grew in intensity as people shared their sightings. Dark shapes glimpsed from the corner of their eyes, only to vanish when looked at directly. A man, pale skin glistening with sweat, swore he saw a figure. No, something, standing in the shadows near the baggage claim, its eyes gleaming with a cold, malevolent light. His voice cracked as he recounted the encounter, his gaze darting nervously around the terminal as if expecting the shadow to return. 3. The departure. The terminal descended into a deeper, more oppressive gloom as night fell. The few remaining lights flickered and buzzed, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to stretch and twist in unnatural ways, their edges fraying as if they could reach out and ensnare the unwary. The temperature dropped, a biting chill creeping into the air, chilling the travelers. It was a cold that wasn't just physical. It carried the weight of something ancient and malevolent, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. A family huddled together near a gate, the mother clutching her children tightly, her eyes wide and wild as they darted around the room, watching the shadows with growing terror. A businessman, his suit now wrinkled and his tie askew, paced frantically near the exit doors, tugging at his tie as if it were strangling him. Others remained rooted to their seats, too afraid to move, their eyes heavy with exhaustion, yet wide open with fear. Sleep was not an option. The darkness held many unknowns and unseen threats. Then, a sound came from deep within the terminal. A low, rhythmic thudding. Distant at first, but growing steadily louder. It was the sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps echoing through the deserted halls. But these weren't the footsteps of a person. They were too slow, too heavy, and each step seemed to reverberate with a dull finality, like the tolling of a death knell. Panic erupted. People screamed, bolting in all directions, their frantic movements chaotic and disoriented as they searched desperately for an escape. But the exits were sealed, the heavy glass doors locked tight, the windows impossibly thick, distorting the view outside into a surreal, shifting landscape that offered no hope of escape. The shadows were no longer content to linger at the edges. They moved with purpose now, fluid and sentient, slithering along the walls, creeping beneath doors, stretching across the floor like dark tendrils seeking out the terrified passengers. One by one, the travelers were claimed. The shadows reached out, ensnaring them and pulling them into the darkness. Their screams echoed briefly, only to be abruptly cut off as the shadows engulfed them and dragged them into the abyss. Those who tried to hide found no sanctuary. The shadows seeped into every crack and crevice, relentless in their pursuit. The terminal became a hunting ground, the shadows of the predators and the passengers their prey. For the truth, the terminal was silent once more, save for the occasional crackle of the intercom and the distant, echoing thuds that marked the end of yet another life. The air was thick with the lingering scent of fear and despair, a miasma that clung to the walls, the floor, and the air itself. Then, as if in response to the bloodshed, the final announcement came, its tone eerily calm, almost soothing. This is a final boarding call for Flight 66. Passengers, please proceed to Gate D for immediate departure. A small group remained, huddled together, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and terror. They stared at each other with hollow eyes, their faces pale as the full horror of their situation sank in. The gate mentioned in the announcement was at the far end of the terminal, a place none had dared approach. It had always been shrouded in mystery, blocked off by barriers that hinted at endless construction, yet no progress was ever seen. Now, the barriers were gone, revealing a long, dimly lit corridor that led to a single gate. The gate loomed ominously at the end of the corridor, its door slightly ajar. A harsh, unnatural light spilled out from within, bathing the area in an eerie glow. The light was too bright, too white, too wrong. It wasn't the light of salvation or escape. It was the light of something far more sinister, a beacon drawing passengers into the unknown. Compelled by a force they couldn't resist, the survivors began to move toward the gate, their feet dragging as if weighed down by an invisible burden. The closer they got, the more they felt their very essence being pulled from them, their bodies dissolving into the shadows, their souls ripped from their forms and dragged into the eternal void that awaited beyond the gate. As the last of the passengers crossed the threshold, the terminal plunged into complete darkness, the oppressive silence broken only by the faint, lingering whispers of the lost. In the deserted control room, empty screens flickered with static, showing footage of an empty terminal, devoid of life, as if no one had ever been there. Now, a silent, empty shell, the airport waited patiently for the next group of unsuspecting travelers, ready to ensnare them in its endless, inescapable darkness. The intercom crackled one last time, then fell silent. Outside, the world continued, blissfully unaware of the horrors within the terminal. Inside, the shadows waited, patient and hungry, knowing that sooner or later more victims would arrive, forever lost in the terminal's eternal muse. Catharsis. My legs were on fire by the time they left the ground. I surged upward like a spark, stretching my arms toward the ceiling, grabbing, reaching. I landed hard on my calloused soles. Once more, then, I leapt, gaining height. The third jump took me higher still, and as I returned to the floor, catching sight of myself in the mirror, I rolled my whole body downward. I found a strange foundation there in the scuffed surface, and I allowed this discovery to take root in the depths of my stomach. It tugged me to the ground like a magnet, providing momentum as I sank. I felt my whole body contort with it, bending in half, caught, flailing like a moth in a web. Stop! Stop! His voice echoed sharply off the white walls, the beating of a mighty drum. It startled me out of my panting half-trance, and Louisa, the stage manager, a severe, spectacled woman in a beige blouse, reached out a hand to pause the tape player. The music, that music, driving, discordant, utterly electric, screeched to an abrupt halt. There was silence. Tugging down my shirt, I averted my gaze from the mirror and extended one leg, gently trying to loosen my muscles. But booming in that same voice, the voice of the giant that he was, he rose from his chair and began to circle me like a desert bird. "You're dragging, Hector," he said. "You're descending into the earth too slowly. You understand? You lack impetus." His words rattled his throat as though it were an iron cage. The dance is precise. That is the challenge of it, yes? It looks wild. It feels wild when you are in it, I know. But it is precise. It is specific. Every motion has intention. 1, 2, 3. He slammed his foot with each word, punctuating them with the thump, thump, thump of his shoe. He rocked his pelvis down, trying to mime for me what exactly I was ruining. And while he could no longer exert himself the way he could in his youth, I saw the whisper of strength in his limbs, the dancer, the echo of the titan he once and still was. At that moment, I hated myself for dancing badly. Really, the only thing worse than dancing badly is knowing that you are dancing badly, that others can tell you are dancing badly. I never imagined I would dance badly before Dimitri Lamoureux. I never imagined I would be dancing this piece before Dimitri Lamoureux, choreographer, director, writer, living legend. He had, in his prime, created 6 variations of what he called human dramas with music. Not quite musicals, but real, honest-to-God works of art. And in my mind, they still towered over the blockbusters dominating Broadway at the time. Louisa, his longtime collaborator, had worked on every premiere and some revivals, such as this one. Lucky her. Lamoureux had practically invented a new language of movement, a language which would inspire crude imitation after crude imitation. Yet, nothing compared. He had flown close to some secret glory, some cosmic thing that no other artist had ever even glimpsed. He was Icarus, never fallen, and I was just me, stupid, out-of-work me. Through dumb luck, I never believed they really liked me in that singing prescription pill commercial. I would actually get to perform No Place, the No Place, that seminal solo dance from Human Drama with Music No. 1, Catabasis. It was not quite a featured 20-minute dream ballet. No. In fact, it had been described by at least one critic as a night terror. Primal, cerebral, something that burrowed into a person's head. It was a career maker, though. The role of the dancer had no dialogue, and sure, it spent most of the show backstage. I hadn't even rehearsed with the rest of the cast yet, but if I could step out and command the room for just 6 minutes and 18 seconds, I would get to do this and nothing but this forever, until my body gave out. And I wanted that more than anything. I saw a grainy recording of No Place on PBS as a child. Flipping through the channels in that little apartment, my knees digging into the living room carpet, I paused as a lone figure emerged onto a darkened stage. Dressed in gray fabric, hunched in a solitary white spotlight, his body heaved with bracing breaths, ignited by a swell of wind and the crash of drums. He spun in a circle before bending backward completely, with a flexibility I could only hope to one day possess. With each movement, though, with each count, I found myself drawing closer and closer until I was practically pressed flush against the screen, near enough that I could feel the cold static pricking the skin of my face. Poised like that, I extended both my arms outward and began crudely mirroring the dancer's steps. Back up, Hector. How many times do I gotta tell you? You're gonna burn your goddamn eyes out, my father growled. Coming up behind me, he ripped the remote from my hands and changed the channel. He barked at me for blocking the picture, but I had already seen the dance. I had seen it, and having seen it, I craved it, like I had tasted blood. And from that day forward, I devoured TV listings whenever I found them, flipped through magazines in grocery stores, or turned on the guide channel to let it roll. Blue in the static dark, searching, hoping it would appear again. I had asked my mother for lessons once, I remember, but she never really gave me an answer. I think she hoped I would simply forget. Not because she didn't want me to have them, no, but because he wouldn't have wanted me to. I had overheard one morning a suggestion that he would smash my toes if he caught me standing on them like a ballerina. I figured she had broached the subject. Either way, they aired the recording of Catabasis again in the autumn, very late at night, long past the hour I would be in bed, or sensible people would be watching. But I had planned for it. For weeks, I had been saving wherever I could. Change from lunch, or from errands to the corner store. Standing in the doorway to my bedroom, one eye on the alarm clock, I, knowing I couldn't be late, clutched the blank VHS tape to my chest. I had scrounged up just enough to buy it for this singular, solemn purpose. I had made this walk many, many times. The long corridor past my parents' bedroom to the living room. And I knew, by then, that I had to take the trek in threes, extending my legs every third step to avoid the spots where the floor creaked. I listened to my father's snoring, holding my breath as I moved, 3 by 3, avoiding the noise, avoiding the discovery, only to take off running as soon as I felt carpet. Hurrying to the television, I muted it with the remote before shoving the tape into the VCR. And as soon as I was sure that little red light was blinking, I watched. Yeah, I watched. And I mirrored the silent movements as if compelled, as if called. And while I didn't learn to dance for real until high school, when I could spend more time outside the house, I did dance for real that night. I hid the tape in a corner of my closet and snuck it out again and again, whenever the opportunity arose, until it broke and I couldn't even rewind it anymore. I'm sorry. I'm in my head. I can do it, I said at last, speaking to Lamoureux in the mirror of the rehearsal room. I shifted my eyes to the floor, but he pulled up my chin, forcing me to look at myself. I know you can, Hector. We saw it in your audition. Do that. Shall we run the section again? Louisa asked. Her finger hovered over the tape player. No. I'm tired of sections. We've been doing nothing but sections. Let's weave them together now. He needs to feel the full scope. Yes? He locked eyes with my reflection. You can do the full piece? From the top? I nodded, because I did not know what else to do. And I realized in that moment that, more than anything, I wanted to impress him. I didn't want him to regret entrusting me, of all the dancers in the world, with this most sacred thing. And so I lapsed into my pre-routine. Walking in a circle, the wood cold beneath my feet, I counted my steps in threes, stretching my legs at every third, out of habit or tradition or superstition. I rolled my hands downward next, running my pointer finger along each of my toes, counting out all 10 before taking my place before the mirror. Lamoureux settled back in his chair with a grunt, and turning to Louisa, I gave a nod. She pressed a few buttons, and with a low analog whir, the music began. I exhaled, my whole chest heaving, and counting to myself, I began. Turning, whirling, writhing, I bent myself backward, stretching my entire torso. Lamoureux, too, began keeping time, stomping away with his foot, watching every movement I made, driving me forward, taking hold of the energy I was hurling out into the space. Thump, 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 thump. Each beat seeped into me, filling the pores of my thrashing body and setting my muscles ablaze. I blinked, and at first, I was not even sure I had seen it. It began as something of a flicker of light, a vague shadow over my left shoulder, almost a smudge on the mirror. The music hastened, and Lamoureux thumped time. And as if keeping up with it, the thing in the glass moved. I spun, too, and it seemed to spin with me. But locked into the dance, I did not stop to look. No, I spun. And I spun lost completely. And with each turn, the shape seemed to take more solid form, until I, facing the mirror, panting, aching, could see it, really see it. Skeletal limbs, impossibly long, arachnid almost, pulsed with tendons and throbbing red veins. It swayed back and forth, collapsing and contorting in on itself, creating and uncreating, almost imitating my movement, but stretching them to the mocking brink. It was a figure, a rotting husk, forged as if from teeth and flesh and living darkness. It moved in a way nothing I had ever seen moved. Choreographed chaos. A star imploding in on itself, a jellyfish. And yet, a man bending completely in half, twitching. It flipped its torso upside down, and its swollen head smacked the floor with a sickening, wet crunch. Somewhere beneath the thumping, I thought I could hear a raw, splintering noise, one that could burrow into a person's skull, digging like claws through grave dirt. Its spine had shattered, I thought. It had snapped itself in half, and yet continued to move. Beneath the music, I could hear the sick, screeching grind of bone on bone. Thump, thump, thump. I leapt, then, just as I had leapt before, unable to stop, I stretched my arms upward. Once, twice, 3 times. The thing leapt with me, limbs flailing, fingers breaking, twisting and cracking as it furled them toward the ceiling. I cried out, landing hard on the floor, traveling too far in the final leap, plummeting askew. The illusion broke. I rolled upward, legs burning, trying to catch my breath. I almost thought I would vomit. And when I looked, there was nothing in the mirror. Oh, why don't we take a break? Louisa was the one to crack the strange stillness that settled over us. Her voice firm as she stood from her chair and pierced the catacomb that the rehearsal room had become. Step into the hallway, Hector. Are you all right? Do you need me to file an injury report? Why don't you get some water? I was working too hard, I thought, as I slumped against the wall in the corridor. Closing my eyes, I took a long swig from my bottle, using the back of my hand to wipe away the layer of sweat that now drenched my brow. The shape in the mirror flashed into my thoughts like a thunder crack. I winced. There had been nothing there, I decided. Of course there had been nothing there. Nobody else had reacted, so there had been nothing there. An absent-minded hand came down to rub my knee through my tights, and for a moment, I was a little kid again. I could feel the living room carpet digging into my bare legs as I let my thoughts drift to that apartment, to my mother, to my father, and to that low-quality VHS recording, to the countless nights I spent caught in the dull glow of the television, dancing in the dark. Louisa came to collect me 15 minutes later, and as I stepped back into the rehearsal room, assuring her I was just fine, I saw that she had taped a wide blue circle onto the floor. You traveled too far last time, Lamoureux said from his perch. I had Louisa mark the edges of the stage. It's shaped like a disc. You must stay within the circle, understand? Are you ready to try again? Yes, but I was just thinking. I mean, sitting out there, I know why I'm falling behind. I first saw this piece on television, the PBS recording, you know, hundreds of times, and the dancer only jumps once. During the climax, I mean, he only jumps once. I'm jumping 3 times, I explained. It throws off the next measure for me, so I'm behind the music, And then I rush. Louisa dropped her script on the floor, interrupting me and catching Lamoureux's attention. He looked back to me after a moment. I remember that dancer from the recording, he said. He was a last-minute replacement. He was not like you. He lacked stamina. He lacked strength. Could not do all 3 jumps and keep going, so we had to alter it. The cameras were already there, and the show must go on, yes? But you have the ability to perform the piece as conceived, Hector. It's why we chose you. 3 jumps. Forget what you know. Watching him, I felt something strange fluttering in my stomach. Maybe it was nausea. Maybe it was embarrassment at him trying to flatter me. But it was enough. I walked my circle of 3s, counted my toes, and straightened up. And looking at Louisa, I gave a nod. The music began. It was different this time, I thought. My whole body struck by a new momentum. I lurched to the left and then to the right, writhing downward, finding each moment, each breath, each precise movement. Lamoureux was not thumping, and while I only caught glimpses of him as I spun, something odd bubbled across his face. Excitement, maybe, or pleasure, and I had done it, I thought. I had danced before the master, and at last I had done it well. Still, I found that I dared not look in the mirror. Not really. Dared not allow my eyes to focus too long on my reflection, lest I see the mover. Some part of me, even then, thought maybe it was still lurking there. I jumped. Once, twice, 3 times, extending my arms, my feet finding the floor as I plummeted down, sinking into the earth. I rolled, discovering that solid foundation again, finishing the dance with one final gasp as the music surged and ended in a cacophony. I had done it, panting, soaked, breathless. I looked up, then my limbs ablaze. I looked up, and there simply was no mirror. In its place, there was only an unbroken wall of black, an abyss. Something moved within it, though, dancing through the void, crunching, whirling, twisting, and thumping. I watched it now, watched the way it transfigured itself. It was almost divine. Some odd part of my brain thought, the way it moved, like nothing else had ever moved. Stunning, yes? Lamoureux said, coming up behind me as I knelt there. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Louisa joined him, and all 3 of us looked. Do not be afraid. It dwells there in the dark. No man in no place. Yes, always there, I think, just beyond what we can see, at least until we descend into it ourselves. He laughed. Do not look for the dead in the glass. You'll not like it. He squeezed my arm. The dance, exactly as devised. 3 jumps when not in public performance, thins the veils, allows us to see. A ritual, if you like. Are we artists, not magicians? And David danced before the Lord with all his might. Louisa and I have not seen in a long time. But I can no longer dance like you. What is it? I asked hoarsely. Do I know? A muse? It moves like the breath of the universe, walks the edge of it, an echo of what has always been. Maybe God. Reductive, but to filter even one part of it for mortal eyes, to be able to imitate some whisper of its aspect. Transcendent. Look, it's choreographing our next masterpiece. I don't understand. Inspiration chooses, Hector. It chose me. He ducked down to speak into my ear. I knew when you gushed about that videotape at your audition. Catabasis has never been recorded for broadcast. Why then did you and only you see it? How? To learn. My eyes widened. So be its filter, be its mirror, be sainted. I rose. I watched. My legs burned. Lamoureux had chosen me because it had chosen me. Yes, I thought. Yes, I wanted it. Me. Out of work, me. The filter. Chosen. I danced. Past imperfect. Bill sat bolt upright into the hotel bed, heart pounding to a familiar refrain. The dream had reasserted itself with a vengeance. From the moment he'd seen the updated list of people attending the conference, one name had stood out. Dake Scratchard was the name of the boy who'd haunted Bill Brown's life more years than he cared to remember. Dreams, fueled by past memories, disturbed his nights when equal amounts of dread and fear surged through his veins, rendering him helpless. As always, the nightmare was a variation on a theme. In it, Bill was a teenage boy running from the gang. He often came close to evading capture, but at the last minute tripped over his shoelaces or some other encumbrance. Then he found himself falling flat on his face outside the old school toilets, the inner doors of which rose up like whited sepulchres. Up close, he could see every cell of his tormentor's face. Ginger needs to be taught a lesson, came out of that hate-filled mouth. A bully, aided by his contemptible band of followers, with their menacing chants of Ginger, Ginger, Ginger. Even now, their words filled the corridors of his mind like a background hiss. No. The sound seemed to come from somewhere outside, as if it belonged to someone else. Not him. You're just begging for it, Billy Ginger. If the teachers won't correct you, we must do it for them. Billy knew no teacher would come. They were never there when you needed them. In any case, the gang always had some lackey watching out. Soon they'd have him crawling on his hands and knees, scooting about like an insect while they kicked him on the hard stone floor. their mocking jeers running through him, he was nothing more than a piece of meat to be hauled about. For them, the high point was shoving his face into the toilet bowl. The stench was the least of it. Clinging for support, he tried to keep everything tight shut while they flushed. Knowing he could not hold out for long, he spluttered to be let go. Then, just as he was about to give up, a final flush signaled his release. He was pulled up, squirming like a rat from a sewer, and left heaving on the floor. For a few minutes, he lay there curled and defenseless, all resistance gone, until the next time, and the time after that. Something so primal, so feral. He could smell it now. Even after all this time, he was defined by it, as if the abuse had become part of a warped pattern of D and A, making him only half human. But somehow, he'd known he was worth more than that. At least his dog seemed to think so. Through it all, the only thing that kept Bill going was the thought of the black Labrador faithfully waiting in the porch. Back home, Kelpie licked away the wounds and salt tears, stayed beside him till the pain subsided. Without Kelpie, he would not have survived. For the purity of a dog's heart knows no bounds. Switching on the bedside lamp, Bill waited until his breathing steadied. Coughing, he climbed into a dressing gown and stepped out onto a small balcony. In the courtyard below, the air was prescient with a damp chill. A few lone trees were scattering leaves, marking the onset of winter. Inhaling a sneaky cigarette, Bill considered his options. It had all happened so long ago, yet the dream had reignited the past, making him feel he could never escape its clutches. If Bill recited the facts of his life enough times, he almost convinced himself of their worth. On paper, he'd worked hard, got married and divorced, and had a son he barely saw. He'd mostly married his wife to please his father because she came from a better background, and look where that had got him. It wasn't his ex's fault if along the way he'd supplemented whatever was missing with a few women he was physically attracted to, but not much else. In the end, it had been like ships passing in the night, all except for Bella. With her, he'd come close to casting a loveless marriage aside, but in the end, something had stopped him. The risk of getting it wrong had been too great, but all that was in the past. Although Bella had recently returned to the company where they both worked, albeit in a less demanding role, he rarely saw her these days. And according to rumors, she was now with someone. In the shower, Bill imagined washing the past down the plug hole. Soon he planned to do just that. The only fly in the ointment, of course, was Bella. He wasn't sure whether she'd be attending the conference. Really, bumping into her was the least of his worries. But if he did, so be it. He hadn't actually seen her name on the list of attendees, so it seemed unlikely. Overall, it would be easier if she didn't attend, because that afternoon, Bill was making his first big speech in his new role as Regional Operations Manager. As if there wasn't enough going on without having to deal with affairs of the heart. The speech, eagerly anticipated, was expected to be the highlight of the day. In the hotel room, examining the set of knives his father had given him as an 18th birthday present, Bill was confronted by powerful emotions. Before him were a dazzling array of sharp pieces, all with wooden handles for an extra firm grip. It was almost pleasurable selecting the one with the pointed end. He carefully placed it in a sheath and adding it to a concealed section of his briefcase. In the mirror, he observed hair that was thinning a little at the sides. Other than that, it was still thick and brown with just a hint of chestnut. Impressive in a well-cut suit, he was tall enough to be considered distinguished. To some, his features might be regarded as handsome. His eyes, however, were preternaturally bright. Sighing deeply, he exited the room. Clutching his laptop and briefcase, he made his way along the plushly carpeted corridor, entered the lift, and headed the 3 floors down to the conference room area. Psyching himself up for whatever lay ahead, he focused on his achievements. Only by drawing on every retail milestone was he able to make sense of the wasteland that was his emotional life. His mind's eye framed the certificates that took pride of place on his home office wall, charting his journey from sales assistant to the coveted role of Regional Operations Manager for one of the country's most successful chain stores. Stores that sold fashionable clothes and accessories for prices most people could afford. Bill's journey into a better life had only really begun when his parents had moved from a London suburb to a city in the Midlands. Then aged 15, he'd welcomed the move with open arms, for it had given him a chance to start afresh in a place where no one knew him, especially at school. He had loved walking unrecognized through the city's streets and visiting its ancient cathedral. One Saturday morning, plucking up courage, he'd walked into one of the city's department stores and landed himself a Saturday job in the menswear department. When he returned home, his mum made him a cup of tea, and Kelpie wagged a warm greeting. "You could do a lot worse. They've got people queuing up to get a place in that store," his mum had commented. Then, examining him more closely, she observed, "You've darkened your hair. Isn't that what Elvis Presley did?" "I expect so. I never liked my natural color, and I want to fit in at this school." That was the closest he'd come to admitting the bullying at his old school. He never told anyone about the suicidal thoughts. He couldn't miss her. Bella was a figure of light, breaking the conference room formality and wearing the most distinctive outfit. To him, she was the classiest person there, surrounded as she was by an adoring team of managers, at one of the middle tables. Distracted by her presence, he could hardly wait for a chance to speak to her. The chance came while she was lining up to choose from a tray of canapes during the lunch break. "I wasn't expecting you to be here, Bella," he said. "I wasn't expecting to be here, but there was a change of plan. It's so good to see you." He found himself saying, "Well, I missed the company and the people. I wasn't the right fit for the new position, even if it was a promotion. It seemed fortuitous when my old vacancy came up again." "So, you didn't have a problem with going back to your old role?" "There's no need to avoid using the word demotion." "I won't be offended," she laughed. "I came to realize I didn't need all the hassle that goes with a high-powered job. I realized I'd made a mistake, and the opportunity came to rectify it. I want a simple life, especially now I'm single. Don't worry. It's all worked out for the best. He wasn't right for me either." Bill could hardly believe what he was hearing. "It's really good to see you," he said again. "I'm glad you think that," she said, smiling brightly. Catching up with Bella had been great. So much so, watching her sleeping the next morning, Bill had almost forgotten about the other thing. He decided he'd know what to do when the time came. If it came, Bill was pouring coffee when Bella opened her eyes. They were warm, like Kelpie's had once been. "That smells good," she said. "I remembered you like it strong." The world outside remained foggy and damp, but for the moment, none of that mattered. Fully dressed, Bill joined Bella on the bed. "What's the matter? You look like you've got the world on your shoulders," she said kindly. "Nothing. Just the conference. A lot to think about." But that was only partly true. If only he could tell her what was really on his mind. Part of him wondered whether meeting Bella again was purely coincidental, or a sign he should let the past go, once and for all. He might have said more, but then the phone rang. "Good luck with the speech." "Not that you're going to need it," Bella said, getting up and kissing him. On the way to the conference room, Bill overheard a conversation between two hotel staff members. "Are the cameras still out?" "Only on the 3rd floor. Also, the ones by the bathroom. They're down, too." "Okay, not good. How long before they are fixed?" "A few hours at most. Maintenance will get it sorted. It won't affect the general running of things." Bill felt almost disappointed to hear the news about the cameras. After his night with Bella, he'd been on the verge of scrapping his original plan. Now fate seemed to be pulling him back. Yet he still hadn't come across his nemesis. About 40 minutes into the second day of conference, a man best described as nondescript entered the hall. Head down, he weaved his way to the numbered seat. Bill clocked him, and his heart sank. Something of the man's stance reminded him of Dake Scratchard grown older. But was it him? He couldn't be sure. 2 hours into the conference, during the talk on sustainability, the man scurried towards one of the exits, and all doubt vanished. Shriveled he might be, but it was definitely Scratchard, galvanized into action Bill left his seat and headed for the nearest exit. Gripping his case so tightly his fingers hurt, he followed the figure until he disappeared into the bathroom. Unless he had to, Bill generally avoided public bathrooms. But this was going to be the exception. Adrenaline flooding through him, he quietly opened the door and stepped inside. Other than a pulsing through his ears and the sound of a dripping tap, all was quiet. Then he heard a retching coming from one of the cubicles. A minute later, the door opened and Scratchard stepped out. Engrossed in his own suffering, he ran to the nearest sink and stood there, heaving. Watching unobserved, Bill was torn between revulsion and an intense hatred. Mostly he was seized by a hatred for all he'd been put through, overcome by a rage for the way this pathetic being had ruined so much of his life. It was too late to change his mind now. The die was cast. Gripping the knife, he advanced, his anger rising to a peak. Suddenly, the bathroom door sprang open, and to his astonishment, Bella entered. She came and stood behind him, putting her arms round his waist. Then, opening his fist, she carefully removed the knife from his hand and put it behind her back. "It's not the answer," she whispered, hurriedly placing it in her bag. It all seemed to happen in slow motion. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Startled out of his sickness, Bill's childhood enemy locked eyes with his victim in the mirror. Both men were shaking, one from the effects of illness, the other from the horror of what might have been. "What the hell?" Scratchard broke out. Then there was a flash of recognition as the years fell back. "Surely not. I wasn't sure if it was you in the meeting, probably because your hair is different. But it's Ginger Bill, isn't it? Only the last time I saw you." The words trailed off, vanished into the unknown. "But you never did see me," Bill said through gritted teeth. "All you saw was a weak boy you could bully because of his hair color. As I recall, the last time I saw you and your sick gang, you'd forced my head down the bog. Have you any idea what that does to someone? Did I do that?" Dake's face reddened. "I was a bit of a jerk in those days. If it's any consolation, life hasn't exactly treated me well. As you can see, I'm not a well man." The edges blurring, Bill felt the first stirrings of pity. "What's actually wrong with you, Scratchard?" Calling him by his surname felt like a minor victory. He'd never dared call him anything in school. Dake shook his head despairingly. "If it's not one thing, it's another these days. I had heart trouble a few years ago, and now this. I keep having to running to the toilet and have a raging thirst." "You need medical attention," Bella said unexpectedly. "You're showing all the signs of severe diabetes. My father got like that before he was diagnosed." 10 minutes later, Bill was sitting with his childhood tormentor in the lobby, waiting for assistance. "I'm sorry for making your school life hard," Dake muttered, unable to meet Bill's eyes. "It was worse than that. You bullied me to the point I didn't feel life was worth living. Why did you? I need to know, Bill demanded. Dake searched what remained of his soul for answers. I don't know, he admitted at last. Maybe it made me feel more in control. Life was miserable at home, and at school, I was somebody in front of the other kids. The rest of the day passed in a blur. But Bill somehow found the strength to get through his talk. He got a good reception at the end, and he couldn't help noticing Bella was clapping the hardest. What made you come into the bathroom like that? He asked her much later. I couldn't believe it when I saw you there. You kept saying his name in your sleep, saying you're dead over and over. I haven't forgotten the nightmares you had when we were together before. Imagine what would have happened if you hadn't appeared, Bella. It doesn't bear thinking about, she said. If you want us to make a go of this, you've got to promise me you're going to get help. The past will always get in the way if you don't. It turned out to be an easy promise to keep. More than a year after that fateful encounter, the terrible dreams are a thing of the past. Though his old enemy is hardly on Bill's Christmas card list, he no longer regards him as a threat. Now, Bill dreams of walking through the park with Bella, taking it in turns to throw a ball for their new dog. Somehow, he feels very close to achieving it.